is Friday, August 20th, 2021. Coming up on Roland Martin Unfiltered, Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. He blames black people?
Am I supposed to hear him? Because I don't know.
In Texas? No, that's actually not what's going on there. We'll talk about that. Also, cases are exploding in Mississippi where 20,000 students are being quarantined, folks. This is going out of control all across the country, and it's impacting water in Orlando. Yes, COVID is impacting whether they're going to be rationing water in Orlando. How about that? Also on today's show, the trial of R. Kelly continues as well. We give the latest on that. It's time to bring the funk on Roland Martin Unfiltered. Let's go.
He's got it. Whatever the biz, he's on it. Whatever it is, he's got the scoop, the fact, the find. And when it breaks, he's right on time and it's rolling. Best believe he's knowing. Putting it down from sports to news to politics. With entertainment just for kicks, he's rolling. It's on go, y'all. It's Roland Martin, yeah. Rolling with Roland now. He's funk, he's fresh, he's real, the best, you know he's Roland Martin now.
All right, the tried and true strategy of Fox News: blame black people when things aren't going so well. Last night on Laura Ingram's show, that is exactly what Texas Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick did, blaming African Americans for the increase of COVID in Texas. Watch this.
Coming after your state really quickly here, and as a response, coming after your state because the increased COVID numbers, hospitalizations, deaths are up in Texas, and there's a direct assault on your governor's policies and your state's policies. Very brief response.
Yeah. Well, Laura, the COVID is spreading, particularly most of the numbers are with the unvaccinated, and the Democrats like to blame Republicans on that. Well, the biggest group in most states are African Americans who have not been vaccinated. And the last time I checked, over 90% of them vote for Democrats in their major cities and major counties. So it's up to the Democrats to get, just as it's up to Republicans, to try to get as many people vaccinated. But we respect the fact that if people don't want the vaccination, we're not going to force it on them. That's their individual right. But in terms of criticizing the Republicans for this, we're encouraging people who want to take it, but they're doing nothing for the African American community that has a significant high number of unvaccinated
TikTok
people.
videos.
So they need
we got
to address
that. We got a lot of TikTok.
Yes.
Go ahead and deal with this with our panel. It's a whole lot I want to unpack. Brittany Lee Lewis, political analyst, Kelly Bethea, communication strategist, Dr. Jason Nichols, Department of African American Studies at University of Maryland. Okay, Brittany. So let's now deal with this. 29 million Texans. Black people represent 3.5 million Texans. If you actually look at the hardcore numbers, white folks being unvaccinated is the problem in that particular state. There were a number of doctors who dropped information showing hospitalizations, largely white folks in Texas as well. But this is the one that jumps out to me the most here, Brittany. Dan Patrick is the Lieutenant Governor of Texas. All Texans. He sounded as if he was saying, our job is to get Republicans vaccinated. Democrats, your job is to get your people vaccinated.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, Roland. Just wow. I mean, first and foremost, this actually reminds me of Governor Abbott when he was trying to blame immigrants for the spread. And we know Black people, immigrants, we are being used as scapegoats for really, really horrible leadership at the end of the day. And all of this, unfortunately, the pandemic in its entirety has been politicized, causing, millions of deaths at this point, in hospitals that are being completely flooded with sick individuals. So it's really unfortunate, and but I'm not surprised.
So Jason, it's now on black people. To Brittany's point, at first you had Governor Greg Abbott, who was trying to get the state troopers to arrest migrants. They were blaming them for COVID. Now they're blaming black people. There are more white people in Texas than black people. Jason? I think we lost Jason there. Let me go to Kelly. Kelly?
Yes, can you repeat the question? I just got in.
Yeah, that is, you have more white folks in Texas. Governor Greg Abbott, as Brittany said, initially blamed migrants. Now they're trying to blame black people. I guess they don't want to blame white folks for nothing dealing with COVID, huh?
Right, they never do. And that's really the problem with all of this. The fact that it's a majority of white people who don't want to get vaccinated. It's a majority of white people who are in the hospital. They are the majority in this country. So naturally, they are going to be the majority who's acting a fool in these streets. So for me, for a governor to blame his constituents as opposed to his own leadership, as opposed to his own administration, as opposed to his own rhetoric on this issue, it's the caucasity for me, frankly. But it's definitely expected coming from a governor who has basically bent over backwards to not follow the science for the sake of politics.
We're trying to get Jason's signal back. It was quite interesting last night, Brittany. I was looking at a number of people who were just blasting Patrick, who were actually putting up various information showing the actual numbers, showing exactly what the problem there is with the number of vaccinations. And the thing is, I go back to still, this is the most basic thing. If you are the lieutenant governor of Texas, you should have a plan of action that's vaccinating people. That's the responsibility. And what Texas did was they were so screwed up. They were like, oh, we'll leave it up to y'all. But let me remind people of something that actually happened, Brittany. Dallas County, when they initially had their vaccination plan, look like we got Jason back. Jason, you're there? Is Jason there?
Can you hear me?
Cool. All right, Jason, I got you. We got you. Actually, I'm gonna go to you, Jason, and come back to Brittany. So, Jason, Dallas County wanted to give the vaccine to the hardest hit groups first, blacks and Latinos. Abbott, his folks said, no, you can't do that. So it's a little disingenuous for Dan Patrick to now say, oh, black people, they're the problem, when Abbott and the Republicans like Patrick refuse to let the local leaders do what they wanted to do to solve the problem.
Well, I mean, disingenuous and Dan Patrick go hand in hand, so that doesn't surprise me at all. We know for a fact, up to, I believe it was July 1st, that when you look at counties that voted for Donald Trump, it was 35% were vaccinated, and counties that voted for Joe Biden, 47%. 14% of Americans say they will definitely not get vaccinated. 69% of those people are white, as opposed to 7%, excuse me, who are black, and 12% that are Latino. And so I don't buy anything that Dan Patrick is saying. Of course, he's trying to deflect the blame for the fact that they can't control this and that they painted themselves in a corner. And he's a disingenuous person. He's the same guy who said that your grandparents should die for this pandemic. So, he's not someone who should be paid attention to. Unfortunately, he's in a decision-making capacity, which is really sad for the people of Texas.
And the thing, Brittany, that just was beyond laughable. This whole idea, well, black people, 90% vote Democrats, so Democrats, you should be doing more to get black people vaccinated. No, how about you make sure the resources are going where they need to go in order to ensure people get vaccinated. See, this is called abdicating responsibility. Republicans love to talk about local control when it's their issues, but now they want to avert blame, and so now they're playing this game.
Roland, you took literally my next talking point. I said literally, I find it fascinating that these same people, Dan Patrick, Abbott, DeSantis, all of them who have campaigned for years on local control and local government are the first people to run over local officials and to make decisions that, do not benefit communities of color once they become head of state. We can even look beyond just getting the vaccine. I mean, what these states are doing with the mask mandates, right? I mean, how can we not hold these people, these governors, right? This lieutenant governor medically, legally, and morally responsible for spreading COVID. And the simple fact that these pro-life folks can come out of their mouth and try and point any fingers about why COVID is spreading is absolutely laughable.
Of course, this lit up on social media last night. Folks blasting Dan Patrick, and he really is one of the dumbest people. I've known this guy for years, Kelly, and he's pretty much idiotic. And in fact, I want to show you this graphic right here. Let's go to my iPad, please. This is the graphic. The latest data from the Texas Department of State Health Services shows that the African American population there is not driving the increase in cases. Black residents in Texas accounted for 16.4% of the state's cases and 10.2% of deaths as of August 13th. While vaccination rates are low among Black Texans, the highest coronavirus rates are among whites and Hispanics, who make up 34.9% and 35.8% of the state's cases, respectively, according to the latest data. That's what happens when you know how to read, Kelly.
Not only when you know how to read, but when you're just cognizant of the facts. When you actually use facts as opposed to your bigotry, you get better results as to how you want to proceed in your public health initiatives. Again, this is just typical Dan Patrick. It is typical racist. I'm sorry. It's just very typical of this Texan administration under Dan Patrick and the like to do something so just crass, honestly. As opposed to doing his job, he will put the blame on every single person except himself, except those underneath him, all for the sake of politics over people. It's sad, it's dangerous, and it's literally deadly.
Really want to avert responsibility. That's what it boils down to. And there have been a lot of pushback we've seen from Black officials in Texas. And again, I go back to when we had Dallas County Commissioner John Wiley Price on this show when the vaccine first came out. Dallas County wanted to distribute the vaccine first to the most impacted communities, Blacks and Latinos, and it was Republicans in Austin, Greg Abbott's office, the governor, who said, no, in fact, we will withhold the vaccine if you choose to implement your own plan.
Right. I mean, this is, and you know what really offends me, Roland, is the fact that he's like, well, Democrats need to handle that. I mean, this is the state of Texas, and you are, Dan Patrick, the second ranking official in the state. For some reason, you seem to think that Black Texans and Democratic Texans or Black Democrat Texans aren't Texans, and therefore you abdicate your responsibility and give it to their political party, as if this isn't one state, this isn't one country, and as if they're not your responsibility. And I find that despicable and disgusting for a public official to do that who's in charge of the state. And your official there from Dallas County is absolutely correct. And again, just to bring up another number, of the people who say that they will never take the vaccine, 58% are Republicans, 18% are Democrats. So even with the disingenuous lie that he's trying to push, he's absolutely wrong in every way and in every statistic that you look at. But again, him putting it on Black people, I'm sure this is not the first time that Black people have been blamed for something that they're not responsible for. And there you see from that graphic that you put up earlier, with 10% representing the deaths, that means they're underrepresented among deaths because they're only about 12% of the state of Texas. So they are underrepresented in a lot of those numbers. But Dan Patrick doesn't worry about that. Like you said, he's just about abdicating responsibility as a leader. And those are the type of people who should not be in leadership positions.
And I just want to give people an understanding of what we are seeing happen all across the South. This graphic came out today. This is in Tennessee. This is new. Go to my iPad, please. This is new COVID-19 cases. Tennessee school-age children ages 5 to 18 by day. Look at how that number jumped the latest day. That right there, Brittany, says a whole lot about what's happening in Tennessee, in these states where you have a governor, who is opposing mask mandates, when you had that idiot Republican Clay Travis who led that crazy meeting in Franklin, Tennessee, saying mask mandates don't work. This is unfair. It's the freedom of our children. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that we're hearing. And there was a video that I came across. I'm gonna try to find it of this white man in Tennessee who stood before the school board and just had to just share his thoughts. I'm gonna try to find it in a second. And he spoke loud and clear about what's going on here. And what's amazing to me are the number of people who are playing games. We are seeing in all of these states children being impacted. We're seeing this was a video right here of a kid in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Go to my iPad. A kid in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 3 years old, impacted by COVID. And remember, it was Donald Trump. It was Donald Trump last year who said, oh, don't worry about it. The kids can't get it. The kids can't get it. And these people are continuing to go there. There's this guy named Justin Canoe. This is a video of Justin Canoe going before the school board meeting there in another city, Williamson County in Tennessee. Let me play this. Watch this.
Justin Canoe, I'm a dad in Williamson County. Didn't plan on speaking, but here we go. First of all, critical race theory is not in our schools, and it never was. And the people here to complain about it did not know what it was 6 months ago and had never heard of it. That's why they're going after diversity, equity, and inclusion instead and trying to pretend they're the same thing. They aren't. And frankly, there aren't many communities around the globe that need DEI more than this one that we live in. On another note, I'm a dad of a new kindergartner, and her first day was right after the chaos last week. She went to school and was one of just a few kids in her class wearing a mask, which made her ask me why she had to. My answer was because we want to take care of other people. She's 5 years old, but she understood that concept. And it's disappointing that more adults around here can't seem to grasp it. I asked a pastor friend of mine, and he was very clear there's no actual biblical justification for using the Bible to get out of a mask mandate passed by a majority of this elected board. But thousands are doing it anyway, calling it a religious exemption, which is frankly just sad. Avoiding masks is not in the Bible, but taking care of others is. And now today we have Governor Lee's executive order to allow opt-outs, which is government overreach undercutting a local decision. If you only like democracy when it goes your way, you don't actually like democracy. Thank you.
Wow.
Our next speakers, Sally Berg.
That's what you call chin checking some folks. I want to bring up right now Texas House member Jarvis Johnson. Representative Johnson, glad to have you back on Roland Martin Unfiltered. The thing here, we were talking about Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick and the idiotic comments he made. I was just showing a video there in Tennessee where the cases are exploding as well. The gall of Patrick trying to blame black folks after they first tried to blame migrants. And even when he did on Fox News, of course, Laura Ingraham, she's so stupid. She's not going to sit here and push back on it. But he was a liar. He lied. He is flat out lying, trying to blame black people and saying, oh, folks like you who are black Democrats, y'all ain't doing y'all job getting black people vaccinated.
Well, he's using statistics and not using numbers, because he said we are the largest number in most states across this nation. And the fact is that we make up 12% of the population. If you just do the math and we only make up, we only get 40% of our people have gotten vaccinated, that means we're still 2 million people. But when you look at the statistics, white people make up the majority of Texas. And when you look at that, then their numbers are well into the tens of millions. And so at the end of the day, he's just simply lying, pandering to his base, doing what he does to get his votes, to make people think that he's strong, and to take attention away from the real issues that Texas face. And so this is just another ploy by another. And I'll tell you like this, Danny Globe can't even get his own name right. So therefore, I know he won't get statistics right. And so anybody that don't go by their own name, I don't even listen to. So at this point, as you already called it, he's an idiot, and there's nothing more that we can do. And that's why we continue to fight against his hateful, idiotic rhetoric and all of the laws that have been placed forth by the Republicans.
Let's also talk about what's happening there in Texas. You were one of the House Dems who came to Washington, D.C. To keep the House from having a quorum You've had 3 of your fellow Democrats go back. Yesterday, Republicans touted at the quorum that actually broke the backs of Democrats. So set us straight, because there's all kind of conflicting information. Do they now have a quorum to move forward with business in Texas? What's going on?
They lied, and they lied. That's all they continue to do is lie. At the end of the day, there is no quorum that was made. The House was supposed to convene at 4 o'clock. There were 3 Democrats that did walk onto the House floor. Walking onto that House floor, they were able to, at that point, make the assumption that they had quorum, and they actually did not have quorum. There were, what I know, at least 4 other Democrats that were not on the floor, and I do know of at least 4 other Republicans that were not on the floor and not even in the city. And so what they did for the next 2 hours, between 4 and 6, didn't do anything. And at 6 o'clock, the Speaker of the House says quorum is met. And as soon as quorum was met, he gavelled out. Now, here's the question that I have for you. If, in fact, they've been waiting on us to come back for 6 weeks to be back on the House floor so they can push this voting bill down our throats and get back to the business of Texas, why did they gavel out so fast? And on top of that, they gavelled out until Monday because they know they don't have the numbers. Secondly, as soon as quorum was met, the warrants for our arrest was supposed to go away. Today, multiple Democrats were visited by the sergeant at arms and the sheriff to present warrants to a few of the Democrats at their homes. So why are you still trying to pick up Democrats when you already have quorum? This is a game. They just simply said, let's just tell them we have a
I think we lost.
We'll wait till Monday.
We lost you. So, repeat what you said at the end there. We lost you there. Say it again.
Well, the second point that I was making was that when quorum was supposed to be made, they gavelled out until Monday. I'm not quite sure why they gavelled out until Monday, because they knew quorum had not been made. And what they're hoping was that when they just simply said, let's just tell everybody that we made quorum. Let's just tell them we made quorum. And they won't know, because no one asked for strict enforcement. Strict enforcement means that everybody had to be on there at their desk and accounted for in order to count 99 members. There were not 99 members on that floor yesterday. They played a game. They pretended like they were they made quorum, when in actuality they did not have quorum. They voted illegally to set forth the bills for committee today and tomorrow. And they're hoping by Monday enough Democrats would have failed for the banana in the tailpipe, and now they're going, oh, we got them back. And so now quorum would be made. Strict enforcement should have been asked for, and if strict enforcement simply to count the numbers. And this is the reason why my fellow colleagues that are standing strong have fought against the Republicans and this voter bill, because we know just like this, they're going to cheat. And they're going to lie simply to keep their power. There's no quorum in the state house.
So can you explain, go to my iPad, please. Can you explain this letter from 3 of these Democrats, including Garnett Coleman, who's an African-American representing a black district, saying they're proud of the work that y'all did, but said that with COVID taking place all across the state, it said, quote, "It is time to move past these partisan legislative calls and to come together to help our state mitigate the effects of the current COVID-19 surge by allowing public health officials to do their jobs, provide critical resources for school districts to conduct virtual learning when necessary, while also ensuring schools are a safe place for in-person instruction and will not become a series of daily super spreader events." I'm sorry. What the hell does the legislature have to do with that? I mean, that's the responsibility of school districts. And so them coming back to do what? What?
Your answer is as good as mine, and that's simply the question. I'll say this about my colleagues. This is what happens when you don't come to practice. You know, this is what happens when you want to try to win the championship on your own. This is what happens when you go rogue and you say, I can do it. I want to take the last shot. I can do it. I can win this game for us. This is a team sport, and we all have to be in this collectively together. And we're all still standing collectively together. There have been a small number of Democrats that have gone back for various reasons, whether they were scared or whether they were looking for an easy ride and thinking they can chum up to the Republicans and think they can get favor. Because at the end of the day, we've watched for an entire session where Republicans are not they're not working, they're not negotiating, they're not communicating. And so there's nothing that they can do. There's nothing that they can do to going back on that House floor. They are the ones who have taken away local control from school districts. Republicans have made superintendents bow down to them. They're literally putting our children in the crosshairs of COVID, and they're using this as a political tactic, and then trying to come back to Democrats and say, well, if you guys don't come back, kids are dying at the hands of Republicans, at the hands of a person like Danny Globe, the lieutenant governor of the state of Texas. And the reason why I keep calling him Danny Globe, because that's his original name. He changed it some years ago. But Governor Abbott and the speaker, they're all complicit in their move. They don't need us in order to get to do work. Let local control be with the school districts, the counties, and the cities to take care of their own constituents. But typical of a Republican government, they want to infringe on the rights of all Democratic cities so they can wreak havoc and chaos and disorder. So there's nothing my colleagues could do in order to go back on that floor. And as they continue to talk about negotiation, and I've said all along, I refuse to take from a who can give me a yes. And to negotiate on the House floor with other Republicans, they can't give you the yes. They don't have the authority. This is the governor's bill. So anything that is negotiated still has to go back to the governor. And if you didn't negotiate it with the governor, then you wasted time. And the Republicans lied to my colleagues, led my colleagues to believe that they would have a voice on that floor. And absolutely, they will not. They will not accept any of our amendments. And they're going to ram this bill right down our throat. We're going to do something on the House side. The Senate is going to have a bill on the Senate side. And I will guarantee you that the Senate bill is going to be the bill that will be rammed down our throats, because we've already passed the bill once before that led us to the quorum break originally, because we passed the bill and said, here, Senate, take this bill. It was 78 pages. When it came back, it was 200 and some odd pages. Pages that we never even saw or never even legislated on. So why would we allow this same thing to happen again? And they tried to sneak things into the bill and then backdoor it by saying, oh, that was a typographical error, or, oh, we didn't know what was in that bill. These same tactics employees are still being used. And unfortunately, some of my Democratic colleagues have, again, fallen for what they call the okey doke in the hood. And unfortunately, but I will say this, I still have faith that they will somehow see the writing on the wall. Somehow what Lieutenant Dan has said will resonate with them, to see his hate, to see his racism, and they'll realize that this is a losing battle that they are fighting, and we still have time to go back to Washington, D.C., to work with Congress, to work with the Senate in order to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, as well as the For the People Act, and get something done in this country. So we still have time, and I'm still holding out hope for my other colleagues that have gone back, because I hope between yesterday and today they see how they're truly going to be treated, and they're going to be treated very poorly. All
right, Texas House Rep Jarvis Johnson, we surely appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. And now that you're back at home, you might want to hire somebody to do some redecorating to get rid of that little thing that's on your wall that really needs to go. I'm just trying to
I wasn't going to even come in here until I saw that shirt she was wearing. And then I ran into my man cave and I said, man, I just can't let Roland do me like that. So.
You need a new interior decorator for your man cave. All right. I appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Peace, brother.
What you see happening here, Jason, I think says a whole lot. In that the actions of these Democrats in Texas are critically important because you have to use whatever means to get things done, and that's what they're doing by holding out.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we've seen Mitch McConnell use everything at his disposal in order to get his will. We've seen Republicans do this over and over again, and yet Democrats oftentimes don't do that. I would have liked to have asked the representative that you had there. I would have liked to have asked them, given what's going on with the Senate and the numbers that they have, and the fact that the filibuster still exists, does he think that this, attempt to get the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, is futile in the long run? That's a tough question, that I was just kind of playing with on my own. But I think that you've got to try everything. You've got to go through every attempt that you can. Texas is already the hardest state to vote in the country. And they're trying to make it even more difficult and take away voting rights. And I think what they're trying to do, the Texas Democrats, is admirable. I don't know how it's going to end up, but I definitely think it's an admirable thing that they're doing, using everything at their disposal.
Well, the thing that I constantly make clear, Kelly, is that people have, if you go back to the 1960s, the original civil rights bill that was proposed by President John F. Kennedy, 1961. The Civil Rights Act doesn't get passed until 64. Voting Rights Act, not until 65. Fair housing, not until 68. And so I kind of need our people today to understand stuff ain't just going to happen in 3 or 4 months. That, you know what, the kind of pressure, I mean, take the Fair Housing Act, for example. The Voting Rights Act is passed in 65. The Fair Housing is August of 65, okay, signed into law. Fair Housing Act doesn't get signed into law until April of 68. That was a 2-year filibuster in the Senate of the Fair Housing Act. King gets killed on April 4th. LBJ sends a letter the next day to the House saying, let's honor the life and legacy of King by passing the bill he gave his life for. It was signed into law 9 days later. That was 2 years of a filibuster. And so a lot of people today, I think, get caught up, the protests, it ain't worked because it's been 4 or 5 months. You got to be in this for the long haul.
No, I absolutely agree with you there. Legislation takes time, but just flat out, it takes time. But what I'm going to push back on is the perception of it all. And the perception is that nothing is getting done. I'm not agreeing that nothing is getting done, but the perception is. So, for example, when you see in the news how our Asian AAPI brothers and sisters were being harassed and ridiculed and assaulted in the span of what felt like a couple weeks, only for Congress to come together, not even within a month or 2 months, to come up with a resolution to combat that assault against AAPI community. That timeline is significantly shorter when you look at that versus our struggle in just getting voting rights. Now, granted,
but Kelly, that was nothing in that bill. Look,
I understand.
Hold up. Why did that bill pass so quickly?
Right.
Because there was nothing in it. Nothing.
I completely agree with you.
That was no different than passing a resolution renaming a post office.
And again, I agree with you. I understand the logistics and the intricacies of that resolution being virtually empty from a legislative perspective. But when you look at the perception, it looks like everybody else gets what they want in a timely fashion. That's all I'm saying.
But that's people who don't even know what the hell they're talking about. Yeah. I mean, again, look, okay, so first of all, okay, but the perception of everybody else, here's the deal. The perception is if they are fighting so hard to keep this from becoming law, that must mean it's really, really, really important.
Absolutely. Again, we're more or less saying the same thing. Yes, you need to be in it for the long haul. Yes, it is going to take time and you need to be in it for the long haul. But you also have to take into consideration, whether they're right or wrong, the perception of our other minority brothers and sisters at least appearing to get what they want, at least appearing to gain traction. When you look at the LGBT plus community, when you look at the Hispanic community, when you look at the AAPI community, whenever there is a huge problem, in the media, like regarding them in the media, it seems to be a pretty significant and quick solution. But when it
But it's not true. But that's not true. I mean, first of all, it's just not true. I mean, the reality is it was a very long fight to get same-sex marriage. I can go back to the first year of Obama. LGBT people were demanding that he get rid of don't ask, don't tell in the United States Armed Forces. That was all 2009. They were demanding that in all of 2010. Then, of course, we had the midterm elections. There were a lot of gay folks who chose not to give to Democrats. Then Obama kept saying Congress has to do it. I can't do it unilaterally. They said, actually, you can. And guess what happened? December of 2010, then they got rid of don't ask, don't tell. That was a 2-year effort. That wasn't, I'm like, literally, that was 2 years. I remember that vividly. They were pushing Obama to do it in the first year. It didn't happen until the end of his second year. So when somebody says that stuff happened quickly, 2 years is not quick.
2 years is not necessarily quick, but when you're looking at 2 years versus decades and even centuries of oppression in the Black community, yes, that is quick on the timeline. So what I'm
compared to what? No. But Kelly, if we're comparing things, compared to what? If we're comparing what, like for instance, Shelby v. Holder took place in 2013 that pretty much gutted Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act. Correct. Republicans were in control of the Senate. You knew it couldn't actually happen. So what happens? Dems retake control of the Senate, take control of the House. Biden is now president. So we've had Biden in the White House since January. This is August. It's 7 months. So again, I understand the point. What I'm trying to say, we also got to explain to people when people say, oh, the gay folks got something real fast. We got to be able to say what specifically, because it's real easy to let people get caught up in, oh, this passed and that passed, without forcing them to say, no, what actually got passed. It happened real quick. Same-sex marriage wasn't real quick. They had to go all the way to the Supreme Court. That wasn't real quick at all.
I understand what you are saying. And if you're just looking at how long a year is or how long 2 years is, absolutely. That's not a short amount of time, objectively speaking. But when you're looking at the trajectory of the entire movements on the timeline, plural, our timeline in the Black community, as far as it goes to getting legislation passed, it has taken decades. It has taken years.
Yes.
As opposed to when you see other minority groups trying to get their stuff passed, it may take.
Okay, hold on. Sorry. See, this is what we got, Kelly. What other minority groups got stuff passed?
You just gave out a list of.
No, LGBT. That is not a minority group. That's white. See, we gonna sit here. See, what I'm not gonna do is I'm not gonna compare LGBTQ to us, because that was white folks. That was white folks.
But they're still a minority group.
No. I'm not gonna call LGBTQ a minority. They're not an ethnic minority. No, they're not. That's white folks.
Strictly ethnic minorities. I was talking about a group of people who are deemed minorities getting legislation passed.
And here's the deal: when you have numerous white gay billionaires, and you have folks who are in positions of power, that's the difference there. If we really want to break down how that thing happened, you have a racial difference as well, which is also why a lot of Black gay folks are saying, hey, there are things that they have been fighting for that still have not been addressed there. That's what that's also what you're dealing with there. What I'm talking about specifically is not this all-encompassing on this issue of this particular bill. What we're looking at is also the difference between power on the state level and power on the federal level. And that, Jason, is also what we have to, which is also the difference that we're dealing with here. And sure, people can throw all kind of stuff out and say, oh, everybody else getting stuff And trust me, I've been dealing with the trolls. But the Asians got their bill, and I keep saying it passed 94 to nothing in the United States Senate. That means there was nothing in that bill that had any teeth whatsoever.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I have to agree with you there. The only thing that I will kind of, I don't know if it's a disagreement. The only thing that I would say to what you're saying is that while it does take a long time for legislation to pass, we've got elections coming up next year.
Yep.
So a lot of people are like, yo, we need to pass this. We need, that's the urgency, the sense of urgency. When your guest was talking about, using a sports analogy, that's why you have that sense of urgency that coaches always talk about. And that's why they're going right now. And that's why they're leaving the state, is because we've got elections coming up now, just about. We're almost in election season. So I think, like, while I dig what you're saying, that, it does take a long time. And if you want to talk about even LGBTQ plus people, we could say it took decades and centuries for them. We could certainly, go that same route. They just started getting legislation, when people were running up in and Harvey Milk and all that, that was the 1960s and 70s. So you could certainly make that same argument there. And I agree with you there. Where I would add a caveat is that there is a sense of urgency, particularly when we dealt with 4 years of Trumpism and the fact that could reemerge. And we saw what we saw on January 6th. A lot of people are like, okay, we saw 2020, we were successful, and they're going to roll it back within 2 years. And so this is why there's a huge sense of urgency. Like, we can't wait, the way we waited for some other legislation in our community. So I think that's the only thing that I would add to the conversation.
The biggest thing that we are dealing with, and this is a part of the battle here. And part of the battle also is getting folks who don't live and breathe this stuff to realize what we're talking about. Again, the reason I bring up those critical civil rights bills in the 60s is because what we've had in this country is this whole view that, oh my God, these things just magically happened. And I'm like, because that's how actually they're taught, as opposed to, no, 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years a slog. Now, no one wants to sit here and wait, but the reality is we have to get people to understand that stuff, this ain't microwave politics. And that's the key, Kelly, that I think when I'm trying to talk to some people, they're like, well, why nothing happened? You're like, bruh, this stuff it ain't just gonna pop off real quick.
I already agreed with you that it's not going to last a year. I already agreed with you that legislation takes time. My point is regarding perception. And when you're talking about people who are intelligent voters, who may not be inundated in this world like we are, but are still intelligent voters, what they see in the media matters. And what they see in the media is that other minority groups, ethnic or not, because the LGBT plus community is a protected class under the Constitution. Like, they are a minority, constitutionally speaking. Whether they're ethnically minority or not, it appears that their problems take precedence over Black lives. It appears that every other ethnic or otherwise minority group takes precedence over Black lives. And while, Jason, you are entirely correct that the strife of LGBT plus people has spanned just as many centuries, if not more so, than Black people in this country. But when you're talking about the perception of how things have been passed and the trajectory of legislation in this country and how things have been passed, it always feels like we as Black people as a whole have to hurry up and wait some more because something happened, or legislation takes time, or any other excuse, however valid it may be, that we just have to wait until they're ready to pass the legislation. That's all I'm saying. The perception is that we do not matter enough for the urgency, and we do.
Well, and I say to folks that, again, perception is also not reality. We also understand the reality of what it means to be Black in this country, which also means that, to Jason's point, which we say all the time, which is why we just can't take elections off. This is why we just can't go, oh, we know Brittany, nothing's really going to change, so we'll just accept it. No, and that is, and look, I get it. I said the other day to the groups that are actually leading this mobilization effort that they're going to have to answer that question. Hey, what actually got passed that benefited Black folks? But we're also dealing with the reality of what is happening politically in this country. When we say, Brittany, that people are fighting tooth and nail to keep us from voting, there is a reason they're fighting that hard.
Absolutely. And maybe I wasn't following. I got cut out for a while there. But I don't see this. I mean, it absolutely is a Black issue. But this issue also affects, and I think Reverend Barber talks about this all the time, this issue affects poor whites. It affects Native Americans. It affects members of the LGBTQ plus community. I mean, we are at the intersection of all of these things. And it's unfortunate that, you know, that the Texas Democrats, those handful of them have gone back because their work is paramount. And I don't believe at this point, Roland, that anything is more important than what is happening with voting. If we can't vote, we can't change anything. We can't get anything passed. And we're in big trouble because the GOP is going to gerrymander their way to a House majority. So it's really petrifying. And we know it's all based on the big lie. So these things do take time. They take years. But we have to keep the pressure up as the people. We have to make sure our elected leaders keep the pressure up. We have to make sure we keep pressure on these corporations. And we also need to ask, and I know we talked about this on, I think, on your second to last show a couple of Fridays ago, about celebrities also using their voice, because this has serious consequences if something is not done soon.
Well, and that's precisely why I keep saying that when we talk about public policy, you cannot say, I want a change in public policy if you don't change the politicians. That's the only way that actually is going to happen. All right, got to go to a break. We come back more. Roland Martin Unfiltered, back in a moment.
George Floyd's death hopefully put another nail in the coffin of racism.
You talk about awakening America. It led to a historic summer of protests.
I hope our younger generation don't ever forget that nonviolence is soul force.
Priceless.
Football bands, and one of the best fan experiences in the country. The Cricket BX SWAC Challenge kickoff returns to Atlanta on August 28th, along with special guest College Game Day. Then Alcorn State takes on North Carolina Central with conference bragging rights on the line. Center Park Stadium is the place to be on August 28th. Come tailgate all day before enjoying a primetime matchup on the gridiron. You don't want to miss this. Check out MEACSWACChallenge.com for more information.
Our age have lost the ability to focus the discipline on the art of organizing.
The challenges, there's so many of them and they're complex. And we need to be moving to address them. But I'm able to say, watch out, Tiffany. I know this road.
That is so freaking dope.
All right, folks, welcome back to Roland Martin Unfiltered. In Florida, a Florida resource officer will not face any additional criminal charges for slamming a high school student to the ground, rendering her unconscious. This is a viral video that went out that showed an officer attacking Taylor Bracey in January. Bracey's mother says her daughter still suffers from sleeping issue and memory loss from the encounter. State Attorney Monique Worrell says the officers' actions were disturbing but not illegal. Parents are calling for the removal of school resource officers and policy changes. We have seen this routinely, Jason, in these school systems where the actions of these resource officers, we've seen this happen numerous times. And I got to tell you, it is troubling, to be honest, to keep seeing these sort of outlandish cops and their actions in schools. That's not, to me, how you should be dealing with students.
Absolutely. I think there definitely needs to be police reform, not only on the streets, but certainly in the schools. I think a lot of schools don't need a police officer. Maybe perhaps some do. I've had students who have told me that they actually felt safer with the school resource officer there. So I don't want to completely downplay what some of my young Black students have actually said, that in terms of it making them feel safe. But we've seen a lot of situations where particularly young Black girls are being manhandled, and that's not acceptable. I'm glad that these parents are standing up, and it's time, that we start to implement some reforms, not just on the streets, but also certainly in a place where our young people are vulnerable, and that's in school. And school certainly should not feel like a prison. So there are a lot of reforms that I think need to happen in a lot of schools around the country.
Brittany?
Yeah, I think this is absolutely ridiculous. I think it demonstrates further the school to prison pipeline. At the end of the day, there may be behavioral issues in classrooms. I was a school teacher in a Title I school for multiple years. These are children, and these kids are still developing. So in my opinion, police have absolutely no place inside of the school system. I think their presence does reinforce the idea that they are not in school, but they are in prisons, because most of these predominantly white schools do not have police officers walking around. But what I can tell you is that the majority of these predominantly white schools have counselors, nurses, school psychologists, and social workers. And we can just look, 1.7 million students, 1.7 million students are in schools with cops and no counselors. 3 million students are in schools with cops and no nurses. 6 million are in schools with cops and no school psychologists. 10 million with cops and no social workers. So I always think this goes back to why there's a quote unquote behavior in the first place. If you look at children as human beings holistically, especially our Black children, and you don't contextualize maybe why they're quote unquote acting out, and instead you're manhandling them, potentially causing lifelong injuries, creating yet more trauma, we are doing our kids a disservice. So not only am I for policing outside of the school, I'm policing writ large. Gotta go.
It's also a matter, Kelly, of, again, I would think that your job as a school resource officer, like cops on the streets, is to de-escalate. What we often see is escalation.
Absolutely. Not only to de-escalate the situation, but considering that you are in a school setting. To piggyback off of what Brittany was saying, these are children, period. They are minors, they are adolescents, they are children. And for these officers to basically dissociate themselves from the humanity of Black children is really just evil to me. I would assume that these officers, I don't know about this officer, but I would assume that a lot of these officers have children of their own, or certainly they know people with children. I'm sure they wouldn't want to see their child in that situation. I'm sure they wouldn't want some other resource officer manhandling a young girl, their young girl, and body slamming her to the ground. And there's also something to be said about, just as a whole, the expedited rate, like the perception that Black girls are more mature and more advanced and more adult-like than their counterparts of the same age. And there are studies on it and the like, but Black girls are still girls. They're still children, and they should be treated as such. So this officer was in the wrong on several fronts. As far as, whether they need to be in schools or not, again, I'm split on the issue, because I know students, like what Jason said, who feel safer around them. I also know of situations like what Brittany said, where they don't need to be there at all. But at the end of the day, this officer, regardless of whether you feel like he was supposed to be there or not, simply did not do his job of de-escalating the situation.
All right, folks. Again, it's crazy to see, I think, what happens when you talk about these resource officers and how they behave in the schools. We remember what took place in South Carolina when the young girl was body slammed out of her desk. I mean, that's just absolutely crazy and outlandish. And so it is sad as well. Let's talk about a recent report that talks about the Department of Justice and Black Lives Matter. There was a study that was called, a report was called Struggle for Power, the Ongoing Prosecution of Black Movement. It finds the Justice Department deliberately targeted supporters of the Black Lives Matter movement. How did they do so? Well, our next guest is the Policy and Research Coordinator for the Movement for Black Lives, Dr. Imara Inya. Glad to have you on Roland Unfiltered. How you doing?
I'm good. Glad to be here.
So break this down for us. Exactly how were leaders deliberately targeted by the Justice Department?
Sure. So this study was conducted by the Movement for Black Lives in partnership with the City University of New York Law School, the CLEAR Clinic, and it was designed to really understand how the federal government charged or got involved in the prosecution of individuals who were involved in the uprisings in 2020. The report covers the time period of August 31st, 2020 to October 25th, 2020, October of last year, and it looks at the charges that were brought to individuals in 326 cases, and it shows quite clearly how the federal government overreached in an attempt to federalize charges against those who are involved in protests. It also really shines a light on the historic role that the federal government has played in attempting to interfere with the rights, particularly of Black people, to express their displeasure, to protest, and to essentially to exercise their First Amendment rights. And so this report, again, done with the Creating Law Enforcement Accountability and Responsibility Clinic out of the City University of New York and the Movement for Black Lives, really speaks to a historic practice of the federal government as it relates to Black people actually exercising their First Amendment rights.
And so the implications of this, now obviously, what was the span of this study? What years did it cover?
So the report actually covers the months between August 31st of last year and October 25th of last year. And it looks at 326 cases in which we found some pretty startling facts. And so the implications of the report, for example, are that in about 92%, almost 93% of those cases, the federal government attempted to upcharge. So essentially to charge at a higher rate or a higher level than those same infractions would be at the state or local level. So it shows a clear overreach of the government, and the implications are significant. One is that when in federal cases, for example, individuals are required to serve 85% of their time. In federal cases, they are placed in prisons that are much more distant. They also, in many of these cases, they require mandatory minimums. And so when we think about the impact of mass incarceration on Black people and look at the right to protest being infringed upon by attempts to criminalize protest, including such measures as mandatory minimum sentencing, harsher penalties, and the disparity that we've seen in the report in terms of who was actually arrested and who was charged. The report outlines that in the majority of cases, Black people were targeted. We found that in the cases where the demographic data was collected, 52% of those were Black, and 91% of those Black people that were targeted were Black males.
All right, then. Questions from our panel. I'll start with Jason first.
So, excuse me. First of all, this seems like really, really incredible work. I'm wondering exactly where you think we should go in order to reform our justice system broadly, and how your research can help in terms of trying to make broader reforms in the justice system.
Sure. So the Movement for Black Lives has really taken the approach of proposing legislation called the Breathe Act that actually does just that. It takes an approach of actually investing in our communities and divesting from the carceral state, which is police and prisons, because we know about the harm that has been done to our communities through mass incarceration, through mandatory minimum sentencing, through the disparities in the criminal legal system. So these are all based on fact. So we've proposed this federal legislation, which parts of it are actually being carried by members of Congress at this time. We believe that we cannot do the same things that we've been doing over and over again and expecting a different outcome. And so what this report shows is that when it comes to Black people expressing their First Amendment rights, and really as of last year coming out because of the murder of George Floyd and in large numbers, that the federal government stepped in ways that they do not typically do to make sure that people that were involved, and especially Black people involved in these uprisings, are getting charged federally, are getting harsher sentences, and they're not treating white people that were involved in protests the same way. And so we're seeing that disparity play out, even in the language that's being used. I mean, we could all remember words like thugs being thrown around, and they're members of Antifa, et cetera. And yet, for white individuals that were involved in the insurgency on January 6th, they were called very fine people. We know that the federal government uses language and propaganda to demonize Black people, and they've done so historically. We can go back to the time of J. Edgar Hoover. We can go back to 1919 and the language that was used that led to Red Summer in 1919. We can go back to COINTELPRO, which actually uses language, the Joint Terrorism Task Force uses language that's eerily similar to COINTELPRO, which was used to attempt to dismantle what they called Black radicals, like the Black Panther Party, the Nation of Islam, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. The government has historically been involved in these efforts to curtail protest, and they've used the legal system to do just that.
Kelly.
Hi. Just for clarification, given basically the harassment that this movement has endured, are there any civil suits or even criminal suits if the harassment calls for it that you plan on filing or bringing charges against those who file these frivolous suits against you?
Yeah, so one of the biggest calls that the Movement for Black Lives is making is for amnesty for anyone, any individuals who were prosecuted during that time frame. I mean, that's one of the first things that needs to happen is amnesty. And we know that there have been individual cases where they are attempting to push back against these charges. But we also know that at the federal level, that's more difficult than at the state and local level. And so there's some intention behind the federal government stepping in even over and above what state and local entities in the criminal legal system will do. And so there are individual cases that are pushing back. We have really been trying to raise awareness of this issue because not only is it a violation of First Amendment rights, but it's being done in conjunction with these attempts at voters legislation. When you criminalize protest, it means that individuals who will face harsher sentences. It contributes to mass incarceration. So we actually have to raise awareness about this issue and about the federal government's overreach so that people understand that taken together with the onslaught of voter suppression legislation, with the onslaught of legislation across the country to criminalize protests, these are things that are done to curtail Black people actually calling out systems of oppression and holding and attempting to hold the government, to hold these systems accountable for their unjust behavior and unjust actions.
Brittany?
Yeah, so, based on everything that you said in the report, I start to get nervous about new legislation for the purpose of domestic terrorism. I feel like the reason why so many legislators in the Biden administration is having this conversation is because of what we saw on January 6th. However, I'm curious to know what you think and if that is going to affect our community, especially when we know we have outright white supremacists in local government, FBI, military, state and local police. So do you agree with this new push to quell domestic terrorism and white supremacy, or do you think it's actually going to harm Black activists?
Well, yeah, we know that this push is going to disproportionately harm Black activists because that has been the pattern historically. So again, for example, you can look at the Joint Terrorism Task Force that was formed. We can look at what happened in 2017, where this new term, Black identity extremist, came out of the FBI for the purposes of actually targeting Black people who are engaged in work to address systemic racism and oppression. And so it is very concerning because we know that there is a disparity in how the legislation can be used. So if you do have a task force like the Joint Terrorism Task Force that was formed to address groups like Al-Qaeda and terrorist threats, and then they have created a focus where, okay, now we're going to also throw in these so-called Black identity extremists so that the federal government has the ability to increase surveillance, to increase punishments, and to increase essentially harm for things that will curtail the people's desire to protest. It's done to dissuade protest, and it's also done to instill a level of fear, because you don't want to, if you express your protest or if you engage in protest, that you'll be prosecuted, you'll be arrested, you'll have federal charges. So this is the concern. I mean, and we see this pattern happen throughout history. So for example, this increased surveillance of the Black Panther Party. I mean, we know that there's a collaboration between the FBI, the local police department in Chicago, to actually ensure that damage was done to the Black Panther Party by using the state, using the federal government to increase surveillance. And we're seeing that same pattern playing out right here, creating new language so that you can then have justification to use the heavy hand of the state to overreach and to dissuade Black people in particular from expressing their First Amendment rights and speaking out against oppression.
All right. Well, we certainly appreciate it. Certainly great work with this, and hopefully with a new administration, there will be a much different attitude from the Department of Justice, because we certainly know how thuggish the last one was.
Precisely.
All right, folks, let's go. Thanks a lot. Let's go to L.A., where the DA's office is reviewing hundreds of cases after two former California police officers are accused of painting a hateful message on a car. Former Torrance officers Christopher Tomsick and Cody Weldon are charged with one felony count of vandalism and conspiracy to commit vandalism as allegedly painting a swastika on the back of an impounded vehicle. Both men pled not guilty to the charges. The DA's office has identified hundreds of cases involving the officers and says his team will review them to ensure there's been no other misconduct. In a news conference with CBSN, both the Torrance police chief and the county DA condemned the act.
Any form of racism, bigotry, hate, or misconduct at the Torrance Police Department.
It's unacceptable, but it becomes doubly unacceptable when we have the people that are sworn to protect all of us to engage in this behavior.
Torrance Police Chief Jeremiah Hart has fired 13 other officers because of an ongoing investigation into messages he characterized as racism and hatred. These two cops were terminated in 2020. All right, y'all, let's talk about the drama with Jeopardy. Al Trebek, longtime host, dies of pancreatic cancer. This is one of the most sought after jobs in television. It is a huge job, also very rich. Well, the executive producer, Mike Richards, basically chose himself. Sony says it went through all of these different research focus groups, but he was the executive producer of the show, and he put himself up for the job. Then he gets the job. Well, then we come to find out that Mike Richards made a lot of comments derogatory about women and others over the last number of years. It became so much that, well, he quit. This is the statement that he put out. It pains me that these past incidents and comments have cast such a shadow on Jeopardy as we look to start a new chapter. As I mentioned last week, I was deeply honored to be asked to host the syndicated show and was thrilled by the opportunity to expand my role. However, over the last several days, it has become clear that moving forward as host would be too much of a distraction for our fans and not the right move for the show. As such, I'll be stepping down as host effective immediately. As a result, we'll be canceling production today. SPT will now resume the search for a permanent syndicated host. In the meantime, we'll be bringing back guest hosts to continue production for the new season, details of which will be announced this week. I want to apologize to each of you for the unwanted negative attention that has come to Jeopardy over the last few weeks and for the confusion and delays this is now causing. I know I have a lot of work to do to regain your trust and confidence. The show will feature guest hosts until a new permanent host is chosen. See, the thing here, Brittany, first of all, a lot of people on social media really wanted LeVar Burton for this. The crazy thing is, how are you the executive producer who's in charge of guest hosts and what slots they get, but you're up for the job? You frankly are in power to sabotage the opportunity.
Well, that's clearly what's happened here. I think rest Alex Trebek's soul. But before he passed, there was an interview where he clearly said, "I want a black woman to replace me." I can't think of her name off the top of my head, but I remember seeing.
It's Laura Coates, who I had on many times on my TV One show, who's now an analyst at CNN.
Yes, and I'm like, they didn't even, and correct me if I'm wrong, they didn't even let her guest host. So you don't follow Alex Trebek's wishes. You don't even let her guest host. Okay, a lot of people liked Burton. He was great. You don't let him in. So then you put yourself in, and then there was no one else to even check you, and you didn't even have the sense to check yourself. When this man has made such wild comments, I was looking today. I mean, he's talking about women, Asians, Jews. Are you kidding me? But I'm not surprised though. I'm not surprised.
So now the question now, what now happens? And part of the issue with LeVar, he was slated to host the show the same week as the Olympics, Kelly.
And that was my point. It just feels like everyone is just trying to do their own thing when it comes to this. Obviously, Richard set himself up. That is his name, right? Richard. He set himself up. To get that job, and it felt like, to me, if you've ever been in a job selection search and you know that you're only there to meet their DEI quota so that the person internally can just get the job and they can say that they did everything they had to do. That's exactly what this feels like, because if you look at how LeVar Burton was set up to host Jeopardy, it was during the Olympics. The advertising during that time was terrible. I mean, it was a lot of pressure, and you can tell that he did not get the support of those in power regarding his guest hosting for that slot, as opposed to the other guest hosts. And then when you hear that Alex Trebek actually picked out a black woman to be his successor, and they just ignored him altogether. It's just disrespectful for some. It's just disrespectful, but also expected.
Jason.
Yeah, I was wondering why he would want. I mean, to go from executive producer to trying to be the host. I'm not sure why he would want that.
What do you mean why? No. This is Jeopardy. This is like the preeminent game show in America, high profile, and a bigger check than your executive producer check.
Okay, fair enough.
And apparently this guy grew up with game shows, had worked on others, and so basically this was like my dream shot, except his past caught up with his present.
Right. My other question is, and I don't know if you guys know the answer to this, but they were saying that Mayim Bialik was, I hope I'm saying that name correctly, Blossom. I just know her as Blossom.
So what happened was, so here's what they did. So they said she is going to be the host of the prime time or special shows, but here's the problem: only one is scheduled in the next year. So they try to act like, oh, it's two hosts. Man, we all know what that is. That wasn't even real. He was a real host.
Right. Well, I mean, you read what you sow. You start saying things. They're going to catch up to you. So he got what he deserved in the long run, and hopefully, I mean, he definitely set people up to fail, particularly popular people. Particularly people like LeVar Burton, even Aaron Rodgers, and set himself up to succeed and put himself in a position. He may not have made the call, but he certainly put himself in a position to be seen by a lot of people. And that's troubling, I think. But then again, as you know, as I've started to learn, TV is a dirty business. And there are a lot of places, I shopped a show to a particular network, and they took the name of the show that I had shopped them and gave it to someone else.
Oh, wow.
So, these things happen. So, it's a dirty business, and you don't have a whole lot of people with scruples in power.
That would be a time for hashtag team whip that ass to show up. Just letting you know. You probably a lot more nicer than I am, but somebody would have got their ass whooped. I'm just letting you know. Gotta go to a quick break. When we come back, a quick break. When we come back, we're gonna give ladies what happened today in the R. Kelly case on trial, R. Kelly trial happening in New York. Back in a moment.
When you study the music, you get Black history by default. And so no other craft could carry as many words as rap music.
I try to intertwine that and make that create whatever I'm supposed to send out to the universe.
A rapper, for the longest period of time has gone through phases.
I love the word. I hate what it's become, and to this generation, the way they visualize it.
Its narrative kind of like has gotten away and spun away from, I guess, the ascension of Black people.
Football bands, and one of the best fan experiences in the country. The Cricket BX SWAC Challenge kickoff returns to Atlanta on August 28th, along with special guest, College Game Day. Then Alcorn State takes on North Carolina Central with conference bragging rights on the line. Center Park Stadium is the place to be on August 28th. Come tailgate all day before enjoying a primetime matchup on the gridiron. You don't want to miss this. Check out MEACSWACChallenge.com for more information.
Hi, I'm Israel Houghton. Apparently the other message I did was not fun enough. So this is fun. You are watching
Roland Martin, my man, Unfiltered.
All right, folks, in the R. Kelly trial, on day 3, Anthony Navarro, who worked for R. Kelly, testified the artist created an environment where he called all the shots. The former employee says that Kelly controlled whether visitors at the Chicago area mansion could leave or even order takeout food. The testimony bolstered the government's contention that R. Kelly controlled everything around him and created an environment where girls and women who entered the space faced strict rules that gave them little choice but to submit to the singer's sexual whims. Now, on yesterday, the doctor who treated R. Kelly for herpes said that he would often, that he allowed him to see him, but not necessarily treat him. In fact, that when he was initially called because R. Kelly was concerned that he had chlamydia, he tested negative for that, but he did test positive for herpes. Several of the women said that R. Kelly knowingly gave them herpes by having sex with them. The testimony from the doctor was quite graphic. He talked about how R. Kelly would call him with lesions, first suggesting that, they'd happen because he wore leather pants without underwear. No, it's not what happened. It was actually him having a sexually transmitted disease. The doctor said, though, that R. Kelly never paid him, but he did fly the doctor and his wife all around the country to various concerts. What we are seeing in this trial, Brittany, is a lot more than what we saw in his first trial a number of years ago in Chicago. You actually have people, women, who are testifying against R. Kelly. This is not the only trial. It's what he faces cases in 2 other states, and so if a miracle happens and he gets off in this case, he still has to contend with the other cases. R. Kelly looks like the jig is up. 54 years old. He may be spending the rest of his life behind bars.
Yeah, Roland, I wish we as a society, specifically our community as well, to protect Black victims, protect Black women, and hold our sexual and domestic abusers accountable. This man should have already been behind bars. We knew R. Kelly was a predator decades ago when they were on the corner selling the tape where he peed on that young child. And we ignored it because he had some hit songs, and we love to blame the victim. We love to tell our young girls who are children that they're fast instead of holding these old behind predator men like R. Kelly accountable for trying to flirt, sexually abuse, groom, and rape these young kids. So I hope that this is a wake-up call to our society, because it shouldn't even had to have gone on this long for us to stop victim blaming, because that's why it has gone on for so long. Stop asking women, well, what did you drink and what did you have on, instead of asking, because the only thing that causes a rapist to rape is being a rapist. And stop having society ask the victim, well, why didn't you leave? Ask the abuser why they're hitting someone, and really do what's right by these victims, because it's absolutely ridiculous. And this man should have been behind bars, but I do think it's inevitable. He's going to end up where he deserves to be.
And again, in each day, we're seeing quite graphic testimony in this trial, Kelly.
Yeah, just something that you said really quickly. He actually tested negative for herpes and tested positive for something else, but he was being treated for herpes, and the doctor concluded based off of his reaction to the treatment that he had herpes, but he did test negative for it. I just wanted to clarify that. It's still all disgusting, but I just wanted to clarify. Either way, like Brittany said, this man needs to be under a jail cell. We knew that he was a predator before the tape. We knew he was a predator when he married Aaliyah, a 15-year-old. We knew when when the album that he made with Aaliyah started off with "Age Ain't Nothing But a Number." His handle or nickname was literally the Pied Piper. And if you don't know what a Pied Piper is, it's a older man who plays like some type of flute or piper, and that music lures children to this predator. And he embraced that moniker. We've known for a very long time that R. Kelly is gross. We've known for a very long time that R. Kelly is a child abuser. But the fact that there are still supporters of R. Kelly right now supporting him through this trial is absolutely disgusting to me. And the only question I have for them are, like, how do you hate yourself this much? How dissociated are you from reality to enable a predator of this magnitude? Because the facts have been out there. He has admitted in several occasions, interviews and the like, that he has an affinity for children. He's a disgusting man. And for you in 2021 to still support him and go so far as to think that, the system is against him and people are racist and people are, it's gross to me. He needs to be under a jail cell. And yeah.
Let me say this here. First of all, the doctor had been treating R. Kelly since 1994. What he said is that he suspected he had genital herpes as early as 2000 because of the symptoms. The doctor testified there was a lab test that came back negative, but the doctor said the timing of the test is important, and the test itself can at times give false negative results. The doctor said, quote, "I did not conclude that he did not have herpes." McGrath testified in referring to his various medical records. He did say over a period of time that he was treated for herpes 5 times since 2000. That was what the doctor actually testified. Jason, when you look at this case, when you look at again the number of people testifying, what you did not have before, you had a lot of people who did not testify. In fact, in the previous case, the young girl that was seen in the video, first of all, people got to remember, R. Kelly was found not guilty because the jury could not ascertain the age of the girl in the video. But they forced a delay for so long. By the time that she actually testified, she was much older. And so therefore, they could not reconcile that. That's actually what happened in that particular case. This is different. You now actually have former employees testifying against him, women involved testifying against him. And so the prosecution has a lot more ammunition to target R. Kelly.
Yeah, I think that the prosecution is probably going to have a pretty rock solid case. And they're going to have, now the documentaries have been made. I didn't watch the documentaries, but one of the things that I think we, kind of piggybacking off of what Brittany was saying in terms of this being a cultural moment for our people, is that we really need to address, sexual assault and predatory behavior, because it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, but R. Kelly was a victim of sexual assault of his sister, if I'm not mistaken. And, I'm sure his sister was probably a victim of someone else. We've got to start to address these issues in our community to cut them off so that we don't have generations and generations of victims and people victimizing other people. R. Kelly is going to be where he deserves, I believe. And I was shocked that he got away with it in the 90s. And I was really shocked with some of the responses that would come on the radio when they would talk about it. People in our community, how they were blaming the victim. I think I read an interview with the victim where she blamed herself. I think that these are cultural, moments where we have to do some teaching and learn so that we don't actually keep this kind of thing going and looking the other way when it's happening. Because, I knew people who said this was a well-known thing in Chicago, that R. Kelly would come by the high school, that they knew that he was, picking up girls at the high school when he was well over age. So this is something that we have to stop looking the other way. And hopefully this will be a teachable moment for the culture.
It was actually R. Kelly's brother who said that the two of them were molested by their older sister. R. Kelly also had said that he was molested by a man when he was around 10 years old. Bottom line is, with all of that, where you're seeing, again, prosecutors lay out a very, very lengthy list of evidence in this case. And so we're going to be covering this even further. Let's give you an update also what's happening in Haiti. Folks, impassable roads, complicated efforts to deliver aid to the region, where more than 2,000 people have died as a result of that earthquake over the weekend, that 7.2 earthquake. Hospitals in Port-au-Prince are closed after 2 doctors were kidnapped there as well. Haitian doctors are demanding their release before reopening the hospital, further hampering the recovery efforts in the country. As I said, nearly 2,200 people have died. More than 12,000 have been injured. They've damaged homes, affecting more than 100,000 homes, and 30,000 people are homeless there in Haiti. Lastly, President Joe Biden today spoke about what's happening in Afghanistan. He made it perfectly clear that American forces are doing all they can to evacuate Americans out of that country.
We're going to do everything that we can to provide safe evacuation for our Afghan allies, partners, and Afghans who might be targeted because of their association with the United States. But let me be clear. Any American who wants to come home, we will get you home. But make no mistake, this evacuation mission is dangerous. It involves risks to our armed forces, and it's being conducted under difficult circumstances. I cannot promise what the final outcome will be, or what it will be, that it will be without risk of loss. But as Commander-in-Chief, I can assure you that I will mobilize every resource necessary. And as an American, I offer my gratitude to the brave men and women of the U.S. Armed Forces who are carrying out this.
I find it really interesting, Jason, to watch this media reaction. I mean, you have these idiots out here. There was some dude who wrote a piece in the New York Times saying that Joe Biden's presidency hinges on Afghanistan. No, it don't. You also, Fox News, so they had some dude who had a biomedical company, who's an entrepreneur, who wrote a book about woke capitalism, trying to blame wokeness on Joe Biden and Afghanistan. These people are absolutely deranged. I'm telling you right now, I don't think for a second that what happens in the midterm elections next year or what happens in 2024, Afghanistan is going to have anything to do with it.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. I think that most Americans wanted an end to Afghanistan. And one of the things that I'd heard, actually, I think it was Lawrence O'Donnell, who said, maybe it's not, wars never end in a pretty way. So maybe it's not the pullout that you don't like. Maybe you just don't like war. And so maybe we should not get into wars. So I think, most Americans wanted an end to this, and it needed to end. We know that the Trump administration met with the Taliban. They basically rubber stamped this whole thing. And it was, there are 2 administrations, 3, 4 administrations that we can blame this whole quagmire in Afghanistan on. And I think thinking people are going to recognize this. And again, elections are all about turnout. So I think that this is not going to hurt Democrats. I predict that Democrats are not going to bleed out the way Republicans did in 2018, where you saw them, the Democrats take 40 seats. I don't think it's even going to be close to that. I think Republicans will regain the House, but not by the margin that we saw under Obama's first term or under Trump's first term. I think it's going to be smaller.
First of all, keep in mind, Republicans can actually gerrymander themselves into winning the House. So hell, they can do that without even one ballot being cast. I just get a big kick, Brittany, out of watching national media go on and on and on. Eric, I think I did it the other day. Eric Bollert had this. Actually, he posted this tweet that came from Andrew Tyndall that showed the amount of attention that national media played to Afghanistan in the past 4 years. I want to pull that up because I think this is what speaks volumes why all of these takes you're hearing on Afghanistan right now are pretty nonsensical and stupid. I'm going to find the exact tweet, but what Andrew Tyndall said is that in the last 4 years, ABC, NBC, and CBS did combined. Here it is right here. From 2015 through 2019, this is how many minutes network news covered Afghanistan. ABC 16, CBS 25, NBC 16. Less than an hour of coverage total over 5 years. I'm sorry. Afghanistan is not going to define the presidency of Joe Biden.
I mean, where do you start, Roland? The mainstream outlets care about sensationalism and ratings. They don't actually care because this has been going on for quite some time, as we know, well over 20 years. And, I think it's important to say that one of the first rules of understanding geopolitics in an imperialist context is recognizing that empire, right, what the America is with all of our military bases, claiming to work in good faith for the purpose of other countries' interest, is simply not true, right? And I'm really tired of the U.S. and the media talk about the invasions of Afghanistan as some failure or mistake or mere lapse, or simply blame it on Joe Biden, as you mentioned, as if this kind of particular conquest is first or last of its kind for the U.S. Just a little bit of background. The CIA toppled the Socialist Democratic Republic of Afghanistan several decades ago, which is how they ended up funding and arming the Taliban in the first place. You're talking about right-wing extremists getting the go-ahead from President Jimmy Carter's National Secretary Advisor. Operation Cyclone literally holds the Guinness World Record for the most expensive covert operation. This was admitted by Hillary Clinton in multiple interviews. It's not even a secret, right? So I think we see, again, the U.S., and it's not a Joe Biden issue, help create the Taliban, use them, invaded Afghanistan when it suited their interests, profited from the war economy, fomented the divisions, and then left, while Afghans are running for their lives. And all of this has to do, at the end of the day, has to do with profit and natural resources. We can look at what's happening with what has happened with the opium crisis here in the United States and how much opium, the opium poppies that are out in Afghanistan. And we can also look again just at profit. So when we think about that, war in Afghanistan was one of the largest transfers of wealth from the American taxpayers to wealth defense contractors. And 51 members of Congress and their spouses own up to 5.8 million in defense contractor stock. So again, I say all of this to say that you are absolutely right, Roland. This is not just a Biden issue. This is, quite frankly, a issue that goes on both sides of the aisle, because war is a profitable business. And at the end of the day, the U.S. will do what it needs to do to secure resources that we don't have abroad.
I just sit here, Kelly, and just, again, when I listen to these people on these shows, yell, holler, and scream, they didn't give a damn about Afghanistan last week.
they didn't give a damn about Afghanistan when we cast the vote to invade Afghanistan 20 years ago. The only one who did was Sheila Jackson Lee.
Barbara Lee.
The only one who voted against that war. There's something to be said about making rash decisions that the consequences of which aren't even considered or simply not cared about. And this is what happens when you have very powerful people making very rash decisions and not understanding the consequences of their actions and just letting the chips fall where they may. My heart breaks for the citizens of Afghanistan because they didn't ask for any of this. They didn't ask for any of this. They didn't ask for the United States to come over there. They didn't. They just didn't. So for me, my ties to 9/11 are a little bit deeper because one of my friends was in the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. So like a lot of people on that day, I was furious. But there's something to be said about, you know, taking a deep breath and analyzing a situation and then moving forward. America did not do that because of the reasoning that Brittany just beautifully laid out. She took most of my talking points. But I say all that to say, this is not going to fall on Biden's head. If anything, it's going to fall on the heads of 4 to 5 presidents, not just Biden's.
Well, I just get a kick out of these people. Like I'm looking at, again, Hugh Hewitt tweeted some nonsense. Things have just gone wrong. It's a catastrophe. Norbert Röttgen told reporters on Wednesday, it's a moral failure of the West, and the geopolitical consequences are still difficult to discern. It's a breaking point. And then he writes, America has lost a war and the consequences will be terrible. Events have left many Americans in a state of collective shock. We can be proud of our warriors and still be deeply ashamed of our country. Let me be real clear. Most Americans don't give a damn about Afghanistan. They didn't give a damn when we invaded Afghanistan, and they didn't give a damn 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, a year ago, 6 months ago, 3 months ago. It was out of sight, out of mind. It was as if this whole notion that America was at war. No, America was not at war. A portion of the U.S. military was at war. Those families with military folks, they were at war. America was not at war. You know what folks were doing? They were playing on water slides, playing golf, going to parties. America was not at war. Don't let these crazy people who love getting us into wars to actually fund the military industrial complex allow you to sit here and get caught up in their nonsense. Nah, y'all, that's just not gonna fly. So no, we ain't buying it. The bottom line is it was stupid for us to have to sit here and spend all of that damn money, $2 trillion, all of that money we spent, and then now this is the new one. Oh my God, we've armed the Taliban with all the equipment left. Do y'all want to rewind? Didn't we leave a lot of equipment when we sent it to the Mujahideen to fight Russia? And what happened? Those were the Taliban. Did they not use the same machinery against us? I don't understand why this is really that hard for people that don't realize that in the history of Afghanistan, no country has conquered those people. I think it's the arrogance of America. And let me be real clear. It's the arrogance of America. Oh, we can beat anybody. We have might. We are the richest, the most powerful. No, it's not going to happen. Because you know what? They said, we'll wait because y'all ain't going to be here forever. And guess what happened? They waited. And when we pulled out, the Taliban took over again. That's what you learn when you can't run somebody else's country. And then I saw this tweet from Richard Engel that I just thought was stupid. This is the last comment I want to deal with this, y'all, before we end the show. Richard Engel, I mean, look, he's a war correspondent, NBC, you know, all that good stuff. I get it. But he said something that actually I thought was just stupid. He goes, Biden says, go to my iPad. Biden says U.S. in constant contact with Taliban to get safe passage to airport. So U.S. asking former enemy, the Taliban, to please allow us to get our people out while they take the country. I'm sorry, Brittany. It's not our country. So we just can't do what the hell we want to do. Guess what? America can't just go to Saudi Arabia when we feel like it.
I mean, this is the arrogance of the West, but particularly the United States, right? And this is what so many, unfortunately, of the U.S. citizens believe, right? Like we are the great, the great country to fix all of the problems in the savage countries, and certainly not having any type of like geopolitical context about what these things are about in the first place. You hit the nail on the head. Americans didn't care about this. This has been going on forever, and Afghanistan isn't the only place that these type of crises are happening. Right? America has their hand. They have more military bases than any other military, and we put more money in the U.S. military pockets than the next eight Western developed countries combined. I mean, folks don't really care. And I think it's just really important for us to recognize that, specifically when it comes to not only putting money in defense contractors' pockets and having that wealth transfer, because it all comes down to money, it's also about how the opium poppies in Afghanistan helped promote the opioid crisis in the U.S., which was directly linked to the occupation of Afghanistan, which then helped the military-industrial complex, which feeds the pharmaceutical company, which then feeds the addiction crisis, which then feeds the prison-industrial complex, which finally feeds the prison-industrial complex, and the cycle keeps going.
Y'all don't fall for the okie doke. It's as simple as that. Kelly, Jason, Brittany, I really appreciate it. Thank you so very much. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, watching as well. Monday, I'll be broadcasting live from Los Angeles, California. So looking forward to that. We'll also have for you a couple of authors who wrote a book on Donald Trump, saying how I can alone fix it and how he pretty much screwed up the last year of his presidency. That's why he lost. We'll also next week hear from Gerald Horn about his new book on the sweet science of boxing. We have all of that for you next week, folks. And then don't forget, we're going to be broadcasting from Atlanta next week for the SWAC MEAC Challenge. So, man, we got a jam-packed show. Please support us in what we do, y'all. Your resources allow us to do what we do. Please join our Bring the Funk fan club. We ask our fan base to give an average of $50 each, $4.19 a month, 13 cents a day. Every dollar you give goes to support this show and what we're doing. You can do so via Cash App, $RM Unfiltered, PayPal.me/R Martin Unfiltered, Venmo.com/RM Unfiltered, and of course Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com, Roland at RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. I want to give a shout out real quick. These are the folks they said, look, we don't trust the other stuff. They actually sent checks. They sent checks in. And so if I'm going to find this real quick so I can go ahead and give them a shout out. Where is it? Well, I know I sent it. Here we go. All right, then. Shout out to Carolyn Vaughn, Shirley Williams, Susie Buchanan, Sharon Green, LaCara Autoduro, Betty Saucer, Leonard Bright, Melanie Tittle, Joan Thompson, Gregory Rogers, and Derek Thomas. Thank you so very much for your support of Roland Martin Unfiltered. We always end the show on Friday with the roll call of our fan club members. If you don't see your name, shoot us an email and we'll get that taken care of. Folks, thank you so very much. I'll see you on Monday from LA. Also, happy 27th anniversary to my sister Levita and her husband Manasir. Today they celebrate again 27 years. I think I got a photo somewhere. Hold on. Let me see if I can pull it up. I know it's on Instagram, but let me see. They put something. They ain't put nothing on Twitter. Oh, you know what? What the heck? Here's a photo right here of them right here. When their daughter Chloe went to Baylor. I don't particularly like Baylor, but I'm a Texas A&M Aggie, but it's all good. So happy 27th anniversary to them. I'll see y'all guys on Monday. Holla!